This is the Roller Coaster Podcast, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Life is a wild ride. It has twists and turns. It's scary, exciting, and downright fun. So throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride.
Okay, before we get started, check out nectargrowth.com. nectargrowth.com. It's free to join, but not for long. Nectar is an extension of the roller coaster. It's where you can start your own journey of self-exploration and growth. In Nectar, you'll find different topics of interest, daily blogs, affirmations, journal prompts, and you can connect with some of the fantastic coaches that have been on the roller coaster. Soon, we'll be adding videos, meditations, live discussions, and events. Our signature course is a journey of self-improvement, and it's valued at $397. But once you join, it's available to you at no cost. So if you're feeling stuck, if you feel like you need to change and not sure where to start with Nectar Growth Network. Come join us. You know you're worth it. Now, let's get on with today's show. Our emotions are clues, little breadcrumbs that give us insight to our subconscious minds. To our own detriment, instead of leaning into our emotions, we tend to numb ourselves and deprive ourselves of the very tools that are meant to help us learn and grow. Joining me today is Kat Lee of Empowered Curiosity to chat about emotional alchemy and how we can dive into our emotions to reveal a greater gift. Hi, Kat.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on the show. And can I just start out by saying, like, you've got such a great, calming voice.
It wasn't
like, ooh, let's just sink into this.
I wasn't always this way. It's been a result of my own personal journey.
I'm sure it has.
Yeah. So what led you in your life to start exploring emotional alchemy?
Thanks for that question. And I'm so happy to share my story. I was such a good girl. I ascribed to that archetype so strongly for so long. You know, I did all the things, I got all the good grades. I came from a very structured Asian family. I'm from a Korean family, and so first generation. And so there were expectations placed on me in terms of like what my life was going to look like, given that my parents had sacrificed so much coming to this country. And I did all the things right. I went to college, met the man, got married, bought the house, built an acupuncture practice. And somewhere along the line, I started feeling like, oh, like, is this it? You know, like we all get shoved into this game of life in some capacity or another. And we get these ideas and stories about what our lives should look like, given down to us from family, from culture, from society. And we take that and we're like, okay, so this is what success looks like in life. And for me, I got to the top of, you know, all the things that I was supposed to do at the age of 30 and was just like, oh my gosh, is this it? And I felt like my life was hollow and empty, even though on the outside it looked like I should be the most fulfilled person. And that's when I started sort of exploring these deeper, darker shadows, you know, these fears and the sadness and the grief that I wasn't really able to process for the first 30 years of my life. And that's where I started my journey. And I'm so grateful to have had tools and teachers and structure along the way, because this is kind of a hard path to do all by yourself. I'm sure you know this as
Agreed.
well.
Agreed. And it's a lonely path.
It is.
Until you find those people whose stories you can connect with.
Mhm.
You do. Certainly, when I went through it, I certainly felt that like I was the only person on the face of the planet going through this. So then comes in self-judgment. You start beating yourself
Mhm.
up. Why
Mhm.
why am I feeling this way? What right do I have to feel this way? Look at
Yeah.
everything that I have, but I'm not happy.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're speaking to the masks that we all wear as a protective mechanism. We all carry these smiles plastered on our faces because that's what makes people feel comfortable. And we're, especially as women, we're conditioned to not make people feel uncomfortable, right? And so,
Mm,
um, and so a lot of my work has been about dismantling those stories and narratives and conditions that, and really just looking at them and witnessing and seeing if I actually choose that for myself, you know. So that was the start of my journey. It's been a 15-year journey at this point, and um, I guess it maybe not 15 years, but uh, it's it's been this process of reclaiming the parts of myself that I really wasn't allowed to express. And in that, it's been about finding who my true nature is. And and in my practice now, I'm a personal development and trauma coach. And in my practice now, that's what I do is I help folks really reclaim the parts of them that may have been lost along the way.
and I always question the word reclaim,
Mm, tell
because
me.
for me it wasn't a case of reclaiming. Sure,
Mm,
before I became a human body on the planet Earth,
mhm.
sure, my soul, my being, yes, it knew
Yeah,
who I was meant to be.
yeah.
But here, I never knew I could ask those questions. The concept never
Mm,
even came up. And I think that's part of the problem, is that because we are forced to fit these societal molds,
mhm, mhm.
and that conditioning starts in kindergarten,
Well, earlier.
early, like in some ways earlier, but sort of, your structured school systems are really the place that they start to solidify you
Mhm,
following this prescribed formula for success. This is what you
mhm,
do to be successful. And I don't think we're ever taught really
mm, mhm,
that we do have the right to be uniquely ourselves, and that
mm,
it is okay to express who we are.
mhm, mhm. I think that you speak to such an important, nuanced point here because that's how I feel as well. In my spiritual practice, which is Taoism, we have this idea that all we all come into these lives with a purpose, a mandate. We call that our Tao. And along the way, we forget or we're conditioned to not remember. And so a lot of the work is about, okay, so who was I before I showed up? And we get glimpses of that, particularly like when we think about where we felt safest and happiest, particularly if we have access to childhood memories, those childhood memories where I felt the most free, the most surrendered, the most wild are the ones that I'm going back to and trying to reclaim and remember. Because I think that those are the moments that my Tao, my true self, was actually able to show up. And having done this work with folks for so long now, when we dive into your core wounds, like the places that just hit you the deepest and you seem to keep coming back to these moments and these lessons like eddies in a stream, you know those are actually deeply, deeply related to your Tao and your mandate. It's almost like you have to go through the opposite end of the pendulum of feeling stuck and frozen and like you have no choices in order to realize that your mandate was actually to be a free person in this lifetime, It's almost like you have to do both ends of the pendulum in order to find that equilibrium, that balance, that middle way.
Yeah. And I think, for some of us, the other end of the pendulum might be a little more subtle,
Mhm,
or we're quicker to pick up
mhm,
on, hey, wait a second, I really enjoy doing this. This resonates with me. I'm speaking my true, authentic self.
mhm.
Whereas other people, I'll include myself in this, you have to go to a far extreme. You have to go to that point of crisis, that point of truly losing yourself,
Yeah,
because that's the only way that you can find yourself.
yeah, yeah. And that's my story as well. I was married to the man that I met in college we were together for 12 years. And that relationship needed to be a part of my story because it needed to show me that this is how I don't actually want to live my life. Again, on the exterior, everything was perfect and happy. And, we had the house and the cars and like all the, exterior manifestations of what we deem to be happy and secure in Western society. But what I was really craving was connection and the experience of actually being seen, known, and understood. And that was something that I hadn't received in childhood either. And so of course I picked a man who couldn't see, know me, and hear me, and that's been part of my journey, is to make sure that I only cultivate relationships in which I feel deeply, deeply known, heard, and understood. And that's been one of my mandates, I believe, is making sure that other people feel that, even if it's for a moment, and get these glimpses of like, oh, I see you exactly as you are, and you don't have to put on a mask for me.
And unfortunately, part of that journey is understanding who those people are that we're putting masks on, or that we're
Mhm,
fitting their definition of who we should be.
mhm,
And often some of those people that don't benefit our higher self are our own family members.
mhm,
So
mhm,
part of the journey is acknowledging, yes, these people may be my family, or these people may have been childhood friends, but if they're not supporting who I am and me being my authentic self,
mhm.
then you have to come to that decision of, well, what role am I going to allow them to play in my life?
Yes, yes. And what role are you going to play in their lives? You know, it's we take on these roles as a survival mechanism. And so that role of me being a good girl was a survival tool. I hadn't, at the age of 5, I had no other tools than to just be a good girl and to ascribe to that particular archetype in order to survive in my family. And you're right, like a lot of these deep core woundings come from our families and early childhood experiences. And part of the work is to actually feel those emotions, and I think that that's where emotional alchemy comes into play, is like we can't actually move through and get to compassion and understanding for our parents. Like I can sit here and say, I can understand why my parents did the things that they did. They grew up in a different culture, they grew up in a completely different generation, they had wounds of their own family stuff, right? But I can't get to that without actually exploring the depths of sadness and grief and anger and resentment, and moving through all of those layers, and then compassion comes, right? I think that a lot of times people try to skip to the like happy, joyful, compassionate space before they've had a chance to actually swim in those deep, murky waters and see what lessons are going to come up for them.
I'm chuckling because you said that your only tool was to be that good girl. Well, I think I chose I'm the polar opposite,
Yeah.
because I was always the one, I challenged authority,
Mm,
right from the get-go. I challenged everything. I wanted to be, as you said, seen, known, and understood,
mhm, mhm.
for being that person that was courageous enough to question.
Yeah.
But that courage diminished, it dissolved, because
Mm,
I, you know, if you don't fit those norms, then you're punished. You don't fit in.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
after, a while of that going on, you know, at some point I let go of it and I try to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then I would rebel. And then I would try to fit in
Mm-hmm.
until finally I just got to the point where it's like, this isn't working. I have to do what's right for me. And if the people around me don't like it,
Mm-hmm.
then they don't like me. And that's okay. I have to
Yeah.
be okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is owning who you are, and not everyone's gonna like it. And that's
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah. And I love this too, because it's like we come from two different ends of the spectrum, but we had to both, sorry, frog in my throat. We both had to try on that like mediocre, like gray cookie cutter life to see if that's what was gonna fit for us. And for a lot of people that's okay. But I think that your audience members, my audience members as well, like they're starting to feel that like itchiness, like this doesn't fit
Yeah.
anymore. Like the analogy that I like to give is if you have like an indoor plant and it's starting to not, it's not like horrible, but it's starting to not look that great anymore. Like its leaves are starting to brown and it's just
That's
like
all my house plants.
it might just be as simple as it needing to be, put into a different pot, like a slightly bigger pot. And so I think that that's the space that I'm speaking to with a lot of my clients is like, this just doesn't fit anymore. And my roots are just touching the edges. And I don't know, like, am I allowed to expand in this container? I don't think I have the capacity to expand in this container. So let's find a container that actually fits you. Let's find a life that fits you instead of you trying to conform to your own life.
Yeah, I like that analogy. So, can you share with me what emotional alchemy is and how we can use it to explore those murky feelings for ourselves?
Yeah. So emotional alchemy at the very surface level is just being able to acknowledge that you have emotions and that all of your emotions are valid, and all of your emotions, like, there's no negative and there's no positive. There's just feelings, right? The problem happens when we try to diminish or compartmentalize or squish down or push down the ones that we deem to be negative. So the first ones that come to mind are like anger and grief and sadness. Um, and when we do that, what happens is that emotion mutates and it turns into something else. That's why, you might blow up at your partner for not taking the trash out. But really, underneath the surface, it's you don't really respect everything that I do around the house. You aren't seeing that, all the sacrifices that I'm making. And so there's like a deep well of resentment there. Right. But it mutates because you haven't had a chance to actually look at that and talk about it and share it. And it mutates into like a hot flash of anger. So that's the strategy that a lot of us take. That's the strategy that I certainly took for many years of my life. And so I think about emotional alchemy as being the opposite of that, in just allowing ourselves to have the permission to look at these darker shadows and look at these hard stories, and with the intention of integrating it. I think a lot of people are scared when they start looking at these darker emotions, like, am I going to get stuck there? Is this where I'm going to be for the rest of my life? And no, the idea is never to get you stuck there, because we are meant to cycle through emotions just the way that we cycle through seasons. And when we give ourselves the permission to actually look at the core feeling emotion and acknowledge it from a non-shameful, non-judgmental, like unscary place. And again, this is where containers are helpful. This is where mentors and guides and coaches are really helpful. Then we can actually see that there's lessons to be extracted from there. Then you're able to move through anger in a healthy way. and you're able to actually move through grief and guilt and sadness much quicker, actually. So that's what I mean by emotional alchemy.
Yeah, and I think, certainly women are really good at this one, and the mask is the mask of fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to do that all the time. I'm
Mm-hmm.
fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And really, you're not.
Mm-hmm.
It's just conditioning
Yeah.
we impose on ourselves
Yeah.
so that we don't engage in those emotions. So that,
Yeah.
every time we say that F word,
Mm-hmm.
it pushes our emotions down further.
Mm-hmm.
It locks them away in, a corner of our subconscious somewhere until, as you've said, it unknowingly bubbles to the surface and just explodes out of us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's years, weeks, months of saying, I'm
I'm
fine.
fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Yeah.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
And then it's like, no, I'm not fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And to speak to that too, as you said, we lock it away into our subconscious. I believe that we also lock it away into our bodies.
Oh,
And
definitely.
so, yeah. And so
Well, you
if you
said
were
you
to
used to
like,
do acupuncture, right? Yeah.
yeah,
So, I
that was
mean,
12 years of my career was an acupuncturist. And um, and so many beautiful books written about this. Bessel van der Kolk and Gabor Mate talk about this, but ultimately the emotions don't just disappear when you lock them away. They get locked in your body somewhere. And I imagine that the entire time that you were saying, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, there was something in your body that felt uncomfortable, right? Whether that was like a pit in your stomach feeling, or tight shoulders, or insomnia, or having trouble digesting. And so each of our bodies has this beautiful way of trying to tell us a story. I think about the body as the storyteller of our lives. And so if we look at it through that lens, then signs and symptoms are not meant to be just pushed down and suppressed and quieted. We're meant to actually turn towards those signs and symptoms and ask the body, okay, body, like, what are you trying to tell me right now? What's trying to come forth? And 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 so a lot of the work is actually trying to connect that experience that the body is somatically having, because you are a walking nervous system, and when you're under stress, then your body's going to take that on as a certain way and take that on as a certain story. And so it's about bridging the gap between the body and the mind and the spirit in this really beautiful integrated way, because that's the only way you're going to have access to your true self, that Tao that you came into this world knowing that this is the lesson you are meant to learn.
and I think that's part of the problem is that, just even if you look at our basic healthcare systems, it doesn't treat whole beings.
Yes.
It doesn't treat mind, body, and soul.
Yes.
If you have a headache, you take an Advil.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like, wait a second, is there sure, I might have a headache because I was up late last night, or might have a headache because I've been sitting at my computer too long.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think if we take a step back and we start looking, okay, well, wait a second, why am I feeling this way?
Mm-hmm.
That's where I think, yeah, you get a better understanding of your emotions, you sort of hit that mastery level. But I think you also unveil, aspects of who you really are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you connect with your authentic self,
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
by being truthful with yourself about your emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. And that example that you gave is such a classic example. Like, I have a headache, I'm just going to take an aspirin, right? And we do this unconsciously. And my invitation there is, you may still end up taking that aspirin, but the sacred pause between you acknowledging that you have a headache and you taking that aspirin is like, that's where the deep medicine is. So in that sacred pause, you may think back and be like, oh, I didn't sleep last night. And so actually what I need is deep restorative sleep, and I still have a life, and I still have bills to pay and things to do. And so I'm going to take this aspirin, knowing that tonight, that is what I'm going to give my body. Right. And then you can take that even a step deeper. Why did I not sleep last night? Oh, I was up till 2 a.m. finishing this deadline. Why is that happening? Why do you feel the need to perform at that level where you are sacrificing and self-abandoning in order to serve a particular company? So even in just a headache, there's an invitation here to actually look at the deeper levels, to see where this is all stemming from. And again, like you said that so beautifully, of like, that's where you're able to access that authentic true self, is when you start asking these hard questions. And I would say, in these seemingly small events that people just have a tendency to skip over, like, let's ask these hard questions when you have a headache, and not when you are needing to, like, I was speaking to a friend the other day, and she was just reading Ariana Huffington's book. And like, I guess this woman basically was sleeping for like 1 or 2 hours a night until she like collapsed and hit her head and had a concussion. Like let's address this at the level that you have a headache, like not at the level that you are, passing out and hitting your head and giving yourself a concussion. Because your body will say, okay, girl, like, you're not listening to me at the headache level. I'm going to just keep talking, and we're going to get louder and louder and louder and louder until you actually listen.
I call it a 2x4, that whatever the universe wants us to learn, it starts off with whispers, or in this case, it could start off with a headache, and then it gets louder, or the headache gets worse.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, if you're still resistant to listening, that's when the universe hits you over the head with a 2x4 by collapsing and getting a concussion, by having a major life crisis. That one way or another, if you're not listening, the universe will make sure it's heard.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree with that. I look back on like all of like my major like bodily injuries, and I'm like, yeah, that tracks. Like, I should have slowed down quite a bit before I broke my ankle, or messed up my knee. Like literal, like, this is what I mean by the body being the storyteller. Is it's such a beautiful metaphor. Is I was such a go 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 type A, like, need to get all the things done on my to-do list, and it literally made it so that I could no longer move, so that I could actually slow down and take this lesson of stillness in.
And that's it, is that, it's having that curiosity, is an asking why. That's when, you can find some odd synchronicities in the world. My recent example is I've not been sleeping the last couple of nights. It happens. You're a woman in your late 40s. Hormones are fantastic. But I get curious, and I'm like, well, why is this going on? And it's like, okay, well, obviously the universe just wants me to pause and rest. Okay, great. So I'm going to do that. And it was through pausing and resting today that I had time, and I watched a movie, and there was something in the movie that just opened up my mind on something. And I'm like, if I hadn't taken the pause, I wouldn't have watched the movie, and I wouldn't have had those moments of enlightenment. So it's like, yeah, I'm exhausted. I didn't sleep, but this is the gift that I received.
Yeah. And it's really the medicine of slowing down. And it doesn't have to look, I think that a lot of times when I say, okay, like, you need to slow down, people think, oh, that means I need to start a meditation practice. And like we sort of tap on that like type A personality brain again with the things that are meant to be self-care. And it can literally be whatever slowing down means for you in particular. And so for you today, it was slowing down and watching a movie that you wouldn't have necessarily done. It can be a meditation practice. Yesterday for me, it was slowing down and going up to the woods and then being with my friends. And like that is, we need moments like that our nervous system needs moments like that. And without those moments of slowing down and sitting, sometimes that's a really uncomfortable place for people. And sitting in the discomfort of slowing down is part of the work.
It is, because again, we're conditioned to pick up our phones and occupy. And I mean, my husband teases me about this all the time, because I'll be watching TV and I'll be on my phone. And he's like, well, what are you doing? Are you like on your phone or are you watching TV? And I'm like, I'm multitasking. He's like, no, it doesn't work that way. Kat, before we wrap up, do you have any, final words of wisdom for our listeners?
I'm just tapping in to see what's coming up. I think really just if we could wrap up our conversation and say, that your emotions are meant to be turned towards these sensations, and these feelings that are coming from your body are meant to be acknowledged. Your body and your spirit are not working against you. They're actually trying to work in teamwork with you. And a lot of times our conscious mind thinks, oh, like I know the plan, right? I've got an idea of what my life is supposed to look like. And it's likely built up from these false conditions and narratives like you talked about. And so the way back home, the way back to your intuition is really going to be through these things that people will tell you not to trust, which is your feelings and your body. So, yeah.
And where is the best place for people to connect with you?
So Instagram is generally where I'm most active. We have got a beautiful community over there. So my handle is at Empowered Curiosity, and my website, which is at www.empoweredcuriosity.com. And yeah, that's generally how people get in touch with me.
And if you're listening and you're looking at connecting with Kat, make sure you check out the show notes. I'm going to have all of her links in there. And Kat, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story.
So lovely to be able to connect with you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creative.